Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We're so glad to welcome you as part of our community tonight. Please note that this webinar is being recorded and distributed live stream. By entering this virtual meeting room, you give your consent to be recorded and distributed by Vienna Live with Simeon Morrow and other third parties. If you wish to not be recorded, please go to the LinkedIn Live video feed, the link to which I've just placed in the chat room. Tonight, our featured guests are two co-founding and original members of Shuffle Demons, saxophonist and vocalist Richard Underhill and drummer and vocalist Stitch Winston, whose latest album, Are You Really Real?, will be the subject of tonight's conversation.
The world is changing and rearranging, so I must ask you, are you really real? Predictive AI is going sky high. It's just like sci-fi. Are you really real? My brain is aching, been overtaken. Are you just faking? Are you really real? The system's broken. What were we smoking? Oh, I ain't joking.
Are you really real?
We've seen it in movies, we've read it in books. The same.
Welcome, Rich.
Welcome, Simeon. How are you?
Rich, so tell us the story of the day when 5 musicians met and became the Shuffle Demons.
Thank you. Well, it was a little bit of a long and convoluted story, but basically we're all Canadian and we all ended up in Toronto, which is kind of, the New York of Canada. I was from a very small town in British Columbia and I went to Toronto to seek my musical fame and fortune and ended up at York University, where I met one of the original sax players, Mike Marley, who asked me to join his house. So I was one of his housemates, and we would have this funny conversation at the end of the night because he was a very professional musician and I was kind of a kid from a small town doing what I could. So I would busk playing music on the streets every night or on the weekends, and he would play wedding gigs because he was a real pro. And we'd meet at the end of the night and we kind of had the same amount of money in our coffers, although mine was all in change. So he decided to join me one day for fun, and we did well, we had fun. Then the next time we went out, he invited Stitch Winston on drums and one of Mike's best friends, Dave Parker, on saxophone. So suddenly there was 4 of us and we were busking, and we had a really great time and a real affinity with each other, and it was just so much fun. And we made some money and helped to pay our way through school. So eventually we got such popularity by busking that clubs started to notice us, and we moved inside, and that's when we added our 5th player, which was an acoustic bass player by the name of Jim Vivian at that point. And that's how we were born. And then we went around the world. We did busking tours, we did club tours, and eventually put out an album in 1986 with a song called Spadina Bus, which was an ode to a Toronto transit vehicle, which is once again a very kind of silly and odd thing for a band to do, but it really gained us a cult following here in Toronto and Canada.
Let's listen to our next track. This is X Marks the Spot. Welcome, Stitch. Tell us the story behind this album. Are you really real?
Yes, well, I'm certainly really real. Um, so we're very fortunate here in Canada to have arts councils on the municipal, provincial, and federal level, and they provide funding to Canadian artists from all different artistic disciplines for a variety of different activities. So if you're Canadian musicians like we are, you have the opportunity to access grant funding to record new albums, to tour both domestically and internationally, to showcase at music industry conferences, to compose, to rehearse, to study. And we're really, really lucky because most countries in the world don't have this. And uh, we've received a lot of support over the years from all of these arts councils. So we're very grateful to them. So, anyways, I applied to both the Toronto Arts Council and the Ontario Arts Council for recording grants to record a new Shuffle Demons album, and my applications were successful. So I let the band members know that we received all this funding, and then we all started composing new material for the album. So Richard composed 7 new tunes. I composed 2 new tunes. Kelly Jefferson composed a couple of new tunes. And Mike Downs and Matt Lagan each composed a new tune. So out of the 7 tunes that Richard composed, 2 of them were vocal tunes. There's 13 tracks on the new album, 11 instrumental, 2 vocals. And Richard composed Are You Really Real, which is the title track from the new album, and the other vocal tune, Money Is My Only Religion. And so after the production of the new album was completed, I decided to send out the recording to a bunch of top tier US based jazz publicists because I thought it would be great to have a really good publicist to help push the new album. And we got some serious interest from a few of them, most notably DL Media Music. That's Don Lukoff and Roberta Lawrence. So we did a Zoom meeting with them and we decided that it would be a great fit. And we had some subsequent Zoom meetings with them. And at one point, Don mentioned to Richard and I that he had a very good working with relationship with some record labels here in Canada. And those are Alma Records, and that's Peter Cardinelli here in Toronto, and Just in Time Records, that's Jim West in Montreal. And he asked Richard and I if we would like him to pitch the new album to Peter and Jim, and we said sure. And Peter was very interested. So Richard and I had an initial Zoom meeting with Peter. It went really well. And then after the meeting, we did some more research on the label and we spoke to a couple of the artists who were signed to Alma just to get their feedback on what it was like to be on the label and to work with Peter. And they both had glowing things to say about Peter. And so we were sold. And so in our subsequent Zoom meetings with Peter, we consummated an agreement. And Peter has signed Shuffle Demons to a multi-album licensing deal. And Are You Really Real is the first Shuffle Demons release on Alma Records. It was released a few weeks ago. And we're just very excited to be part of the Alma Records artist roster. And we're looking forward to a long and fruitful relationship with Peter.
Let's listen to our next track from the album. This is Money Is My Only Religion. Sorry, I think there's a problem with the audio. Sorry, there's still a problem with the audio. Don't know why that's happening. I wanted to go on. Tell us, Richard, when you look back at over the past 40 years, what is your favorite moment?
Thank you, Simeon. Well, I know I was just speaking with Stitch earlier because there have been just so many wonderful moments. I originally thought, oh, what about Vida Vereinigung Nacht in Germany when we were there playing as the two Germanys officially joined together, and that was really quite an interesting experience. But he said, wait, there was a great time that we had in Vancouver, and so I wanted to mention that. We were playing a club called the Town Pump, which holds about 500 people in Vancouver, and this was kind of the height of our popularity in our first kind of wave of popularity in the 90s. And we had 500 people, excuse me, in this club, and we were playing, we were having a great time, and I looked at my watch, and it was after 2 a.m., and at that point in clubs in Vancouver, last call was 2 a.m., and so I said, "Oh no, we have to stop, and people have to leave." And I said, "We have one more tune," and the club owner came up and said, "No, man, you can't play another tune. I mean, people have to leave. I mean, it's after 2 o'clock, and we're going to get in trouble." And I was like, "Look, don't worry. We're going to play this tune. I'm going to clear your whole bar for you in 5 minutes, and you'll be fine." And he's like, okay, but you better be right, because you know the law could be on us. And so I said to everyone, "Look, we're playing this tune, which was our hit, Spadina Bus, and we're going to leave the club together. So make sure to take all your belongings with you when you come with us on this crazy conga line." And because that was our signature move, we would play Spadina Bus at the end of the night and then do a crazy conga line, often going outside, or if we were playing on a stage at a big festival, Stitch would climb the lighting gear, much to the horror of the organizers, or end up on the roof of the stage, much to the horror of me, as I thought he was going to fall through and kill me. So anything could possibly happen with this walk around. So I said, "Let's go." So we started playing. We exited the club with about 300 people, and we had this incredible conga line. We're weaving through the streets of Gastown in Vancouver. The first place we go into was a bar, which was known for the more serious drinkers who were a little down and out, and they just were falling off their chairs. Like they just couldn't believe what was happening as these 300 crazed people came through playing saxophones and clapping and dancing wildly. And then we went through this all-night Italian restaurant, and the same thing. People were just absolutely amazed and enthused. Fortunately, no police showed up, so then we went back to the club. We went around to the back of the club, and I don't know how I sensed that it was the right move to do, but there was a doorman there with the door open. And I went, "Oh my God," or a bouncer with the door open. I went, "This is our time." So I stopped playing. I said to the band, "Run." And so we all ran into this open door. And the guy at the back was like, "One, two, three, four, five. That's it." Closed the door, and then the fans were pounding on the door at the back. And it was really one of our, the most hard day's night Beatles kind of moments, with these kind of rabid fans and just walking through the clubs. But that still to this day is my favorite part of the show, where we do this walk around and we don't know what's going to happen. Stitch could climb a light pole. Well, he does incredible dancing. We get playing and people go wild, and it's just so fun to interact with an audience like that. So I'm going to say that's my favorite moment.
Did you invent this Congo line, or how did that come about?
Well, it's walking in the crowd is a pretty big part of the jazz tradition. In New Orleans, people used to do that all the time. I mean, New Orleans, the home of parades and Mardi Gras and all that. So getting the crowd involved like that was a big part of the jazz tradition. I mean, we remember the stories of even John Coltrane in his early days having to, quote, walk the bar and play. So as denigrating as that might have been for such an amazing artist, we understood that is really powerful to get the audience involved. And because we started out as street musicians, and we really were aware of the more theatrical we were, the better we might do in our little change box. We would do it all the time. And in fact, there's a really funny bit of video from 1985 of us playing on the street and doing this incredible walk through the crowd and wild sort of finale to that song. So yeah, not only part of the jazz tradition, but part of the shuffle demons tradition, but we certainly didn't invent it.
Let's listen to our next song. Hopefully this audio is going to work. Apologize if it doesn't. This is Prism. Oh,
Dang, we're in the same spot.
oh, I'm sorry, that's not working. So that'll have to go in the podcast then. I'm sorry for everyone else today that we can't listen to that. So that brings us then to our philosophical conversation. And I'm going to share something else, unless that gives me an issue. There it is. So, and it is In 1962, a large hall was erected above Berlin's Friedrichstrasse train station. The station, situated entirely within East Berlin, was a heavily regulated border crossing that served several West German metro and train lines. The new hall became known as the quote-unquote Palace of Tears due to the tearful farewells it hosted. Today, restrictions are being placed on cross-border movements between the Canadian province of Quebec and the U.S. state of Vermont. The Haskell Free Library, a public serving building, the reading salon of which is located both in Canada and the United States, has become a symbol of today's political struggle between national self-determination, Pax Americana, and global human rights. In the summer of 1985, the year after Shuffle Demons formed, the band embarked on a 3-month-long busking tour of Europe, including stops in West and East Berlin. Tell us the story of that tour, Stitch. Let's start with you. Has that story influenced how you view the new restrictions on the Haskell Free Library?
Sure. So let me tell you about the tour. Our first stop on the tour was Paris. And so the first place that we busked was in front of the George Pompidou Center. And we met this Gambian tailor named Gimme. And he said, man, you guys, you need some new wardrobe. So he outfitted all of us with these traditional Gambian clothes. And we kind of we kind of looked like I don't know. What did we look like, Richard? The Blues Brothers from Africa or something?
Well, we looked like the Blues Brothers before, but yeah, they were kind of more like dashiki hippies, but with an African thing and then sunglasses. And yeah, it was a very organic look.
Yes. So yeah, our tour took us all over the place. It was completely impromptu, just like the entire evolution of the Shuffle Demon. So remember we went to Amsterdam and we met this crazy character named Paul, and he found us this used van that we could tour around Europe with. And it just so happened that it had a Canadian flag on the window. I guess one of the previous owners was Canadian. So it was this old beat up van and it had this sunroof. And I remember one day we were driving down the Autostrada in Italy and the sunroof flew off. And all of a sudden we were windblown and we got it fixed. And then I remember we went back to Holland at some point because we wanted to go check out the North Sea Jazz Festival. And we got pulled over by the police, and this policeman started sticking his hand underneath the van and pulling out pieces of the chassis. And then he ended up taking the van away from us. So there we were in the police station with our personal belongings and no van. Anyways, one of the other pit stops on this busking tour was West Berlin. And at the time, of course, there was the wall separating East and West Berlin. And you could get a 1-day visa to go to East Berlin that it expired at midnight. So, Richard, I'll let you take over and tell this hilarious story.
Okay, well, we'd lost the van at that point, so we really had nothing to lose, and we thought, well, why don't we go to East Berlin? Let's check it out. Like what, it was still kind of in the Cold War in the 80s, and we wanted to see for ourselves what it was like. The most interesting thing was we had to change 20 Deutschmarks, which was about $15 Canadian at the time, into 20 Ostmarks, which was the currency of East Germany. So we each had to do that. We changed it. And then when we got over there, we were like, oh, well, beer is 10 cents, 10 Ostmark cents a glass. We had a meal for less than 1 mark. We had our meal and then took some beers to a park. And two of the other guys kind of, they like to drink. It wasn't me, but we were hanging out and having fun. And one of the very friendly members of the band, Dave Parker, noticed some kids playing, and he decided to play a saxophone for them. And then all of a sudden, it was like, wow, there's a guy playing saxophone, and this other fellow came over and sort of befriended us, and he said, look, let me take you on a tour, and let me show you what things are really like here. And that, to me is the wonderful thing about being a musician. As a tourist, you only get so far when you go somewhere, and you can be lucky and run into people. But as a musician, either by happenstance, if you're busking or playing in a park, you'll run into some interesting people, or if you're playing in a club or whatever, some fans will be interesting and take you on a tour, or the club owner or the promoter will kind of get you into the culture, and that's what's so wonderful about being a musician and being a traveling musician. Anyway, we ended up at his place, which was interesting because he had a regular job as an engineer or something, but he also liked to take photos. And what was the sort of stark realization was he got one roll of film per month that he could use and develop. And he took some really interesting photos. I wonder if he has any of us, and if he's still around, that would be really cool if he showed up somehow. Um, but, it's one of those lessons as well that limits can really make artistic choices more interesting. So he did some really interesting things because he had this hard limit. And now in our digital age, of course, we don't have that. Anyway, he took us to a bar. We had a great time. It was a birthday party. It was amazing. I looked at my watch, and it was quarter to 12. Once again, I'm always looking at my watch going, oh God, we're too late. And we had to get back to Checkpoint Charlie, which we went through. And we just...
By midnight.
By midnight, exactly. The visa expired at 12. So we took the subway, and our friends, a couple of our friends, our friend was with us. And then we had like about 500 meters or so, or half a mile to run to the border. And it was already 12 at this point. And so we were running along, and I remember, geez, I wasn't able to spend hardly any of my money. So I held up my 15 Ostmarks that I still had and put them on the ground like, hey, this is probably a month's pay for you guys. Take it, because we're nothing we can do with it. We got back to the border, and it was about 12:15, and we got some very angry looks. And Stitch, you remember exactly what they said.
Yeah, so the East German border guard goes, "You are late. I must punish you." And we're going, "Oh, great." I think we just won ourselves a one-way ticket to the Siberian Jazz Festival.
Exactly. And there was you said something, there was another person who'd been late before. Oh, this
Well,
was after.
first of all, yeah. So first of all, then he takes each one of us individually into this little room and searches us. So a few days earlier, we were busking in West Berlin, and somebody had thrown a plastic fish pen and a pair of those phony ears into Richard's saxophone case. So this East German border guard is going through Richard's saxophone case, and he pulls up the fish pen and the ears and goes, "What is this?" So anyways, he threatened us, but then he let us go. So we walked across the border back to West Berlin, and we saw the West Berlin border guard, and we told him what just went down, and he goes, "Oh man, you guys are lucky. You got off easy. Last night a guy was 20 minutes late, and they made him stay all night long and clean up the place."
I think they probably saw us and they went, yeah, if we made those, it would probably just make it messier if we let those guys clean it up. Oh, but if we, so having said all that, we've experienced that kind of thing, and I guess what makes it the most scary is the unpredictability of it all, and I think that's kind of what's the most scary about the current, relationship between the United States and Canada, and the United States and the rest of the world is that in sort of the before times, it felt like everyone was kind of playing by the rules, and the rules were established by trade agreements, or sovereignty, or whatever. And now it feels like the new administration is making up new rules as it goes along, and that just makes it a lot more difficult, you know, it, and it makes everyone feel a little bit more unstable. So I know that some Canadian musicians, for example, have been stopped in different places in the States and asked to have their phones looked at, and asked about their, what they thought of Donald Trump, and that sort of thing. And one really hopes that it doesn't get to be more like that because we have so many wonderful American friends. There's so many incredible American artists. We had some people, I was playing in a bar the other night and someone threw some American money in the tip jar and they were like, "Do you accept that?" And I was like, "Of course." And then we hugged and they said, "Look, we're really worried about for our own, about what's happening to our country and we're sorry for, what you're going through as well." So I think there's definitely a groundswell of people who are concerned. And I think, the main thing is you just kind of want the regular, normal old rules to be followed, and then everything's fine. That's my take on it anyway.
And we've got some applause there.
Thank you.
And so you see also musicians have a job to do at this day and age.
Oh, yeah, sure. I mean, I think once again, we can stress how music brings us all together and the love of music and the love of playing music is wonderful. And that music, it really is a language that transcends actual speech and it's an emotional language that can show us that together we're friends and brothers and sisters and that we should try and work together for a better world in the end, because what we do is bring light and enjoyment and fun to people's lives as much as we can. And this sort of, if we'd heard the song "Money Is My Only Religion," that sort of obsession with material gain kind of can really cloud what's really important with our humanity as a species, as different countries, and as people in general.
So that will go on to the last question then. First to you, Rich, Stitch, and then to you, Rich, which is what would you like people to take away from this album when they hear it?
Joy, happiness, fun, because the Shuffle Demons make jazz music really fun for our listeners. Excitement, because we're improvisers and we take a lot of risks when we're improvising. We really go out on a limb. So we really take the listener on a journey and we love them to be right there with us. So yeah, that's what we hope people take from this new album. But really, to appreciate the Shuffle Demons, you have to check out the band live. So if we happen to be playing in your country or your city, then we strongly encourage you to come and check out a live performance of the band. But we're happy because we've managed to capture the essence of what we're all about on this recording, which is difficult to do, but we managed to do so.
Rich?
And yes, thanks, Ian. I think also that it's cool for people who may not have heard of us before to listen to what the band sounds like. And we have an interesting instrumentation, just three saxophones, mainly acoustic bass and drums, and to sort of check out and go, "Hey, I'm not really missing that guitar. I'm not really missing that piano." Of course, we love music that features those instruments, which in the jazz world, we call comping instruments because they are kind of laying out the chords and complementing the chord structure of songs and adding an accompaniment to what's going on melodically. But we found a way to do it without a piano or guitar or comping instrument. And so that is really kind of a unique sound, but I think it still sounds really full. So I think that's something that if you're new to the band, it's something to check out and to hopefully really enjoy.
Are there any questions? Would anyone like to jump in about any of these topics or anything? Yeah, Dr. Davis, hi.
There you go. Unmuted my audio. Well, thank you, both of you chaps, Richard and Stitch. Enjoy your music. And I also really enjoyed your remarks about the relationship between Canada and the United States. I live right up here on the border, in upstate New York. I've been in northern Vermont where that library is, which you probably have heard of, where you can stand in the library and you have 1 foot in the USA and 1 foot in Canada. And believe me, just keep your fingers crossed. Trump will get kicked out sooner or later.
Yeah, and it's, it's a beautiful thing that we have had that relationship, and hopefully we can maintain that relationship of good friends. We have different ways of doing things, but we're good friends, and we don't need to have battlements on our borders. We can do our different things and still be respectful of each other. So yeah, that's what we're hoping on, maintaining and getting back to for sure, because we have great friends. We've played in Rochester before, we've played in Buffalo, we've been down to upstate New York, and I've been to Vermont with other bands. So many great creative people, wonderful people there. We want to just be friends.
I'm glad you had a good time up here.
Definitely, definitely.
Thanks, Dr. Davis. And any other comments, questions? Okay, so we will go on to our finding out how we can buy the album. It's easy enough. It is at shuffledemons.com. There we see the website. And so you can just go down to music and look at that. Shuffle Demons, you can buy the album. They're on iTunes, Spotify, Amazon Music. So it's easy enough. You just go to shuffledemons.com and click on music, and you can buy it right there on the website. And then you can find out about their upcoming tour dates that we have in May. They're going to be playing in Lakefield, Ontario. And if you have any questions, is that okay for them to reach out to you,
Sure.
Stitch or Rich?
Of course.
Absolutely.
So
And
whether
just so you know, we have a whole slew of dates coming up this spring and summer into the fall. We just haven't posted them yet because we're waiting for the festivals to officially announce their artist lineups. And once they do, then we're going to post all these upcoming dates in Europe, in Canada, and also in Africa. So we're very excited about this.
So do check out shuffledemons.com. You can reach out to Richard and to Stitch, find out about their upcoming tours, and buy the album. Thank you so very much to Richard Underhill and to Stitch Winston.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you so much, Simeon. Thank you to Vienna Live, and thanks to everyone who participated today. And we hope to see you somewhere out there. And thanks for listening.
So let's see what's coming up next week on Vienna Live. And while you're at it, you can, if you visit simeonmorrow.com, you can also sign up for the Friday newsletter that I send out. It's actually just a greeting email where I discuss my thoughts on the week's show and give exclusive insights in the upcoming week's show. Next Wednesday, we have the Yuval Cohen Quartet, Winter Poems. Soprano saxophonist Yuval Cohen's debut for ECM Records is a thrilling offering that captures the brother of longtime ECM traveler Avishai Cohen, charting innovative paths through 8 originals in graceful interplay with his freshly formed quartet, pianist Tom Oren, bassist Alon Nayar, and Alon Benjamini on drums. Let's go to the intersection of classical music and jazz. That's next Wednesday, Yuval Cohen Quartet, Winter Poems. As always, all information about upcoming shows may be found at www.simeonmorrow.com. Once again, thank you so very much to Richard Underhill and to Stitch Winston. Thank you to Vienna Live sponsors, Victoria and Frederick Mulligan. Thank you to Abby Moser, Allison Hull, Agnieszka and Benoit Rivolet, and Mary Schlesinger for their support of this show. Thanks to my cousin Mike, a marketer from Layer App. If you're an architect and engineer, they have a really cool tool you can check out. And thanks of all, of course, to you, thanks most of all to you, our participants, who make it all worthwhile. From Toronto, Ontario, Canada, and Washington, D.C., goodbye, and see you next Wednesday.
So long. Thank you.